I'm Ken Dunn. We're in Chicago, and I had the good fortune of growing up in a Amish Mennonite community in Kansas. We respected the land, plants and animals, and had a very highly functioning community depending on the land and farming organically. I went the higher education route, which doesn't always happen in these communities, and ended up at the University of Chicago looking for a PhD, still trying to come up with the answer of how can an honest person make a good living in the modern economy. And it's much easier to make a good living taking the chemical and industrial shortcuts which diminish the quality of human life. In my studies at the university, I focused more closely on the gap between the rich and the poor, that our economy seems to be failing in that it's allowing or causing the increase of the gap between the rich and the poor, and nowhere was it closer to be seen than at the University of Chicago in a very high-functioning, affluent community of Hyde Park and the neighborhood to the south, Woodlawn, where it was the devastated community that experienced extraction of jobs and most services. 50% of the population unemployed, 50% of the land devastated and vacant. So I early on said, my early issues have to take second seat to this pressing issue, inequality in and near the community that I've taken as my own. So I came up with a research to find what caused this difference and what could be done to correct it. And it occurred to me, okay, let's get a price tag. What would it take to have the build out of this devastated community cleaned up, fixed up, and treated out so that it could be a very livable community? The answer is billions, more than any city, state, or federal government could afford to do in each community. But there's not even the willingness to do any of this. It's not a general recognized need to eliminate the difference between the rich and the poor, which, by the way, was Plato's main notion of the business of the state. It's to eliminate the difference between rich nations and poor nations externally so that there's not conflict between others taking what you have, and internally no divisions, because it can cause insurrection and fighting and crime among the population. So the business of government being eliminating the difference between the rich and the poor seemed not to be feasible to advance this was the late 60s. Nobody was going for that. So I thought, well, the only way we're going to do it is find new resources that aren't recognized. And in a trip into Woodlawn, which, by the way, was encouraged by the Orientation University at that time, said, by the way, your community is bordered on the south by 61st, on the north by 47th, east by the lake. Don't go beyond those frontiers, it's not safe. And I'm thinking, ooh, wow, I didn't think of community like that with borders. What's going on here? So I almost immediately ventured beyond the borders to figure this out. And they were right, there was seeming dangers, but I noticed it seemed much safer during the daylight than at night. So I actually was in a PhD program in philosophy, and I thought, this is my interest now, how to, in a real situation, eliminate the rich from the poor. Let me think if we can use things whose value weren't recognized by others as the engine for rebuilding the community. The resource that I identified, all the vacant lot was filled with trash, but also industrial material that had taken its one use and been thrown away. Papers, metals, glass, and plastics. So that was a detriment to the well-being of the community, thing that should be eliminated, but it was also an asset if it were in a load going to be sold to a manufacturer. And then there were, on some of these vacant lots, half a dozen men drinking outside of a liquor store, throwing their bottles into the vacant lot. And so, as a test case to my project, I borrowed a van and put 6 barrels in it, 55-gallon steel drums, and arrived at the lot unannounced and said, "Hey guys, I have an idea. Let's pick up all of these bottles and put them in these barrels sorted by color, and I'll go sell them at the local glass plant and come back and split the money evenly with you. I'll take a share and each of you take a share." With an hour, all the glass was picked up in the barrels by color. I went and sold it, and $20-some was the take. I brought it back and we split it up evenly, 3-something for each of us, which wasn't was about the average wage in '67 for an hour's wage. And so I proved that my beginning concept had some potential. Take undervalued things and turn them into value. But one of the guys did a very important thing. He interrupted me as I was walking away and said, "Hey man, where do we work tomorrow?" Which let me recognize the other element of draining a community. You drain it of hope as well. You start a project and give it 3 hours, as I did. And I was about to introduce a 3-year project, a PhD, before I would do anything else. And I thought, I was about to say, "No, I'm here for another reason, you won't see me again." But I said, "I don't know, but I'll be back in 2 weeks with the plan." So in the 2 weeks I came up with the map of the Woodlawn area with stops every 2 blocks until the community was covered. 9 o'clock at one spot, 9:30 at the next. I would be at those spots at those designated hours with a truck, a scale, and money. They could bring any of the materials that could be sold, papers, metals, glass, and plastics, separated as required, and I would load the truck, paying them for their work, and sell it and have the cash again for the next week. Well, it was a tremendous success immediately. I soon hired one of the unemployed men. He used to work for the post office. He just had gotten into drinking too much. He promised to stay sober, and he did for 15 years. He drove the truck. Somebody else did the buying, and so I could go back and work on my thesis, but always with the correction and addition of this real life experience. And basically it boiled down to unrecognized assets, both material and human, with a bit of ingenuity, can be turned into a viable local economy. The resource of bottles littering by the men who were thought to be hopeless drunks, drinking mostly because they didn't have jobs, they could be put together to bring the bottles to get them back to the glass factory. And so that program we still operate today. We call it our buyback recycling program, and it's a significant way of getting our vacant lots and our resources out of the waste stream.